So in the last video, I talked about how I was able to get sales up by well over 50% by focusing counterintuitively on the top performers rather than the middle performers or on the bottom performers within the sales team. That technique I labeled the top have more headroom. However, there's another thing I did that increased sales even further. So the top have more headroom took me from about 25 million a quarter to well over 42 million a quarter, but I was able to get another 32% bump on top of that, taking me to about $56 million a quarter. What did I do? Now I'm going to label this one, again, counterintuitively, the salespeople should never be the people answering the phone. Now again, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to think, what on earth is he talking about? So let's get into it. And I want to preface this by saying I've done this multiple times in different organizations and in different types of organizations, from organizations that are selling to dealers to organizations that are selling small ticket items, maybe in the 10,000 range. I've also done it in instances where I've had a very large sales team who are selling into the multi-million dollar market in corporations as well. So I've tried this model multiple times, and every time I've been able to get a result, regardless of the size of the organization, as long as there's a minimum number of salespeople. So this all starts to have an effect once you go over, say, about 6 salespeople. Then there's a way in which you can pull this off. So what did I do? How the sales team were originally operating is pretty typical. So you have an office and you have salespeople spread around. Sometimes the salespeople are out in different locations. If it's a national sales company, incoming calls would then be routed to the individual who was responsible for that region. So sometimes that can be at the city level, sometimes it can be at the region level, maybe multiple states, something like that. And the calls would then go through, and it would be up to the salespeople to answer the phone. They were field salespeople in some instances, and in other instances they were in the office, but they were still responsible for working with customers and closing deals. The problem is they were often already on the phone talking to a client, trying to close a deal or progressing the sale or just doing some step in the sales process, and the phone would ring. And then the original sales manager at the time would be shouting at the people, answer the phone. And the salespeople would get frustrated because they're already talking to a customer. Or sometimes they weren't on the phone, but they were working on a project. So they'd be trying to get a quote out the door on time to be able to make sure that they're able to follow through on the sales process and close the deal. So there's frustration all round that the phone was ringing and it wasn't always getting answered, or it wasn't getting answered as quickly as possible, and the salespeople were being interrupted from doing their job, because their job is to close the deals or push the sale through the sales process to get it to a close level. But then there's another incoming call, and obviously they kind of want the lead, but they don't want to drop what they're doing right now. So it was a problem because it was just a mess with the phone ringing, everybody getting frustrated. So what I did was really simple. I hired some low-cost inside salespeople. So I built up a team of people whose job it was just to answer the phone. So the key in understanding this is to understand the difference between the salespeople whose job it is to answer the phone and the salespeople whose job it is to close deals, and how they get paid differently and how they're incentivized differently and the interplay between them. So first of all, let's break down the difference in the roles. The field salespeople are the expensive salespeople. They're the ones that are focused on following the sales process through. Sometimes, depending on the type of thing you're selling it, they might be designers, they might be technical specialists, they might be doing demos, they might be going visiting customers, but their responsibility is to do all these things, is to build a relationship up with their clients over time, to nurture the sale, design solutions, produce quotes, constantly follow up and chase the client until they get to the point where they close the deal, and they're paid on commission based on sales, based on closed deals. They are encouraged to spend as much time on the phone and for as long as it takes, for as long a period on the phone with the client, as long as it takes to actually close the deal. You don't want them interrupting their sales process, answering the phone every 5 minutes, trying to pick up on a new client. So what you do is you set up an alternative sales team. These are not experts. They don't even have to be salespeople. When I was interviewing for these people, all I would do is I'd place an ad, entry-level sales position, no sales experience required. Call this number. I wouldn't have anybody sending me resumes. I didn't look at any resumes. All I did is say, if you're interested in this position, call me at this number. The people that aren't willing to respond to an ad for a sales job, that aren't willing to pick up the phone and just make a phone call and talk to me, I weren't interested in. That's the number one requisite. They can't be frightened of the phone. And so many people nowadays are terrified of actually talking to somebody and making an ad hoc phone call without some kind of official appointment. They've got to be really comfortable with picking up the phone. And my interview was simply to listen to them and understand whether they could actually hold a conversation. Could they speak clearly? The amount of people that would call and I'd get a muffled voice like this, and they couldn't really, I'm sort of, and they just couldn't form a solid sentence and speak clearly. And that's all they've got to do. They've just got to be able to have an upbeat voice, be very clear, and communicate clearly. They don't have to understand the product. They don't have to understand anything other than being able to carry on a conversation with somebody on the phone. Their job is simply to answer the phone, to get to the point quickly. Can they get to the point quickly? Book an appointment with one of the field salespeople, schedule that appointment, and get off the phone as quickly as possible so they can answer the next phone call. Now, in between phone calls, if the phone isn't ringing 100% of the time, there's lots of other work they can do. There's admin jobs, there's follow-up, they can help the salespeople out. There's all other kinds of things to do. But their job is to make sure that phone always gets answered. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen with sales organizations is half the time they don't answer the phone and they think a customer is going to just leave a message. Or if they do leave a message, just imagine it. You're looking for a particular product, you go online, you do a search, and you get a list in the search results of potential companies that you can call. You call the first one, they don't answer the phone. You may or may not leave a message. If you do leave a message, once that person has left a message, they're not going to sit there and think, okay, I'm going to wait for this company to call me back. No, what they're going to do is they're going to call the next company on the list. The first company that actually answers the phone has the biggest chance of getting that deal. If you do not answer the phone, then best case what you're doing is you're encouraging your prospective client to get a second quote. Whoever answers the phone gets that appointment, and then when you eventually call them back, you'll now second bid on that project. So oftentimes I'll hear a sales organization complain about the fact they have trouble closing bids. Their bid ratio, their close ratio on bids is low. One of the reasons for that is they're just not answering the phone in the first place. If they did a really good job of engaging with the customer when the customer first called them, the probability that that customer is going to go and call other clients is greatly reduced. Not everybody has the time, energy, or interest to get multiple bids for everything. So you can control the sale, you can increase your close rate, your ratio on bids to sales, if you just make sure the phone is always answered and always answered within 2 rings. That's what these guys, that's their job. Their job is to answer the phone, and they're paid on just the number of appointments. The more appointments they book for the sales team, the better. That's really all we care about with these people. They're not expensive. They don't have to have sales experience. They just need to be able to speak clearly and concisely. That's it. They're not difficult to hire. Interviewing for these people is a much tougher process because you're really interviewing for sales skills, background, experience, and everything else that goes along with that. So you're going to spend a lot more time interviewing for these people. But these people, they come in, they're either good on the phone or they aren't. If they're great on the phone and they book appointments, and it's competitive. So you have a chart, who's booked the most appointments today? So there's competition to actually answer the phone. When you've got people whose job it is to answer the phone, they'll compete with each other to see who can get to that phone call first. The dynamic in the sales office fundamentally changes, and you get some really fun and interesting interplay between the inside salespeople, as I would call them, the people that answer the phone, and the field salespeople, or the design consultants, or whatever you want to call them. you get a very interesting interplay between these two types of salespeople. But if you do it right, it can really work to your advantage. So an interesting refinement that I did after a period of time in working with this kind of system was to change the pay structure counterintuitively again of these individuals so that they got paid 50% on the number of appointments and 50% commission on the deals closed from the appointments they set. Now this was very controversial because these guys play no part in the process of actually closing the deals. So why should they get commission on the sales? Well, the reason for that is what tended to happen a bit was that these people would book appointments, and some of the field salespeople get frustrated because they say, well, this isn't really a sales opportunity. They just wanted to follow up on when am I going to get my product, so a customer service type thing. But these guys would tend to do that, over position incoming calls as appointments when they're not really appointments, because what they're doing is they're basically qualifying an incoming call. Is it a sales opportunity or not? And then routing it in the right direction. So if they book an appointment for the field salespeople, they can count it towards their commission. It adds up on their numbers, and they don't care whether it's a real appointment or not because they're paid on the number of appointments. So I changed it so they got 50% commission. So rather than the field salespeople here pushing back saying, hey, you're sending me appointments, they're not really leads, what happened then is that because these people now get commission on the sale, they really want to give their field salespeople they work with as many real leads as possible. And what would happen is the inside salespeople would push back on some of the field salespeople, where one of them would be giving leads to a particular individual, and that individual wouldn't be attending the appointment or wouldn't be following up and closing the deal. So this inside salesperson would say to the field salesperson, hey, I'm not going to give you any more leads because you're not closing anything. You're shit at closing deals. And there'd be some frustration here, a good tension. So it's almost like you get a natural kind of sales management process as an interplay between the two, because the field salespeople would push back on the inside salespeople if the appointments weren't real leads, and the inside salespeople would push back on the field salespeople if they weren't closing deals. So whoever the field salespeople that were best at actually closing deals tended over time to get more appointments from the inside salespeople, because the inside salespeople would know, if I give an appointment to this particular person, I've got much more chance of getting my commission on the sale. So this pushed them to do a really good job of qualifying the opportunity. Is it a real lead? And then giving it to a salesperson who was good at closing the deals. So it was like a natural interplay between the two types of salespeople that sort of self-managed each other to make sure that the leads were real and the appointments were followed up on time. Brilliant process, and it worked really well. The fact that these people weren't influencing the deal after the appointment was set is sort of true, but they were influencing in as much as they're giving it to the salesperson that is actually effective. And again, this is one of the reasons why the salespeople that were great at closing deals tended to get more leads. And that's what you want to happen, right? So as I've been explaining this, I've been very loose about the terms I've been using for these people and these people. I would classify these as the real salespeople, and these aren't really salespeople because they're booking appointments. You can call them salespeople if you want, but they're really phone answerer people. And that's why starting this, what I said is just salespeople. And what I mean by that is the people that are responsible for closing deals should never be the people interrupting their sales process to answer the phone. They should be focused on and closing those deals. Now, one last caveat on this, because you may be thinking about this and thinking, well, I don't have a large sales organization like that. I've only got 1, 2, or 3 salespeople. And I've successfully pulled that off with as few as 2 salespeople. And rather than hiring a third salesperson, what I did is I put in place somebody to answer the phone, and they would qualify and book appointments for the salespeople. And that process still worked in that situation. My cost was much less, because this person is much less expensive. They're not an experienced field salesperson. They're just somebody that can talk on the phone and can book an appointment. That's all they've got. They don't need to have any product knowledge at all, or at least enough product knowledge to be able to qualify, is this a real lead? Is this somebody that actually wants our product? But beyond that, they don't need to know all the technical details or how to design it in or any of that. So it can be done with a very small sales organization. If you do this, you're going to increase the degree to which your phone is reliably answered within 2 rings. If you've got a business that depends on sales, you really want to answer the phone within 2 rings consistently. That on its own will get your sales up. So, bottom line, your salespeople should never be answering the phone.